without purpose, without a true north, without a compass point, we're bound to wander. We're bound to go astray. We're bound to get off course. We're bound to misuse something that we don't know its true purpose for. And that's never truer than human beings when we don't know what our purpose is. And leaders can be, a wonderful thing, but also a dangerous thing. Misuse position, misuse power, misuse privilege, misuse the opportunities that leadership provides, and a lot more people get hurt, a lot more people suffer.
Hey, and welcome to the Tarun Stevenson Leadership Channel, where we're helping you lead, communicate, and grow to your full potential. I'm your host, Tarun Stevenson. Whatever portal you are tuning in on, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, your favorite podcast, or Instagram, make sure you subscribe and follow so you don't miss any of our episodes. Let's get into it. I'm here with Pastor Dave Westbrook, and he's all the way from North Queensland. He's been a great friend and leadership mentor of mine. He's been involved in church ministry for over 30 years, and also he's a very talented businessman in the area of property development. And it's just such a pleasure to have you on the show today, Pastor David. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Tarun. Glad to be with you.
Thank you. That's awesome. Now, I hear it's been a little bit cold up in North Queensland. Well, cold for North Queensland. Is that right?
It's very true. I had to shoot the penguins off my front lawn this morning. It was very nippy, very cool.
Penguins indeed. Very good. Well, the reason I asked you on today, I mean, we've known each other probably, it's coming up 5 years now. And I met you first at a conference that I attended at Mackay Christian Family. And that was the church you were pastoring at the time. And we came up with a team from my church in Brisbane, and we spent the week with you guys. And the first time I met you, it was in the green room, if you want to call it that. It was like a breakout space for some of the senior leaders to just sit and relax in between sessions. And there was this gentleman that was walking around asking everybody, have you got enough to eat? Have you got enough to drink? Is everything being looked after? Are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? And I was later to find out that it was you, and you were in fact the senior minister of the church. And here you were waiting on tables and looking after the needs of everybody. And it just struck me so much. It made such an impact on me, because I've been in more than a few of those pastors' breakout rooms or green rooms. And more often than not, the senior ministers have a special room all to themselves, and they sort of hobnob with the guest speakers, and you don't see them in those breakout rooms. But here you were, the senior minister, the host of the conference, and you are serving on tables and looking after your guests. And so I just wanted to talk to you today about servant leadership. And it's kind of a buzzword, but I really want to just dig deep and get your thoughts on what does servant leadership mean to you? So maybe just as a general starter, why servant leadership is so important?
It's a great question, Tarun, and an essential one in the culture of leadership that we're seeing emerge around the world, particularly within Western democracies, and of course across the wider church context. For me, it's really simple. It comes down to the fundamental question of, do you want to be a disciple of Jesus Christ?
Yeah.
Do you want to follow the teachings of that first century rabbi who showed us and modeled for us and exampled for us a very clear pathway of leadership? And leadership really comes down to example. What you are is flows out and is evidenced by what you do, not what you say, but what you do. So for me, servant-hearted leadership really is at the core of being a wholehearted disciple of Jesus. I can't separate, I can't disentangle the teaching and example of Jesus from this whole deal. It's what exemplifies, it sets him apart. It's part of what makes him completely other to us or to historic or even present religious or spiritual figures. Jesus took on the form of a servant, we read in Paul's writings. It was perhaps part of the earliest hymn that the church sang, and he codified it for us there in his writings. And I can't get around that. And I think if you want to genuinely be a follower of Christ, you've got to walk his way. You've got to follow his footsteps. You've got to take on that posture of heart. Now, I think it's important to take the heart of a servant, but have the mind of a son. And I think that's where people sometimes trip over this whole deal that, yes, I'm called to serve, and in fact, my motivational gift might have a strong brush of serving others in it, but I can't excuse myself that I don't serve. That's not my thing because well, I've got strengths in other areas.
Yeah.
This is quantifiably the essence of Christ, and we've got to model it. We've got to exemplify the teachings of Jesus. We've got to walk them out. We've got to live them out, and I take great pleasure in serving and assisting and bringing joy, lightening the burdens of other people. And I just think that's part of what spiritual maturity is all about. And I delight in it. Seeing that other people are enjoying, that other people are getting the best out of the moment. I think that's really special. Peter says, God's given us a gift of grace. We should use that gift of grace to serve each other. And there's no way around it. I talked a minute ago about the idea of the servant heart and the sonship mind, and that's an interesting tension to walk through. Maybe we'll have a chance to chat that through a bit later on, but it's just imperative to me to be an example, to be a follower of Christ and to serve others.
That's fantastic. And let me press you a little bit on that answer, because it's clear that your faith is a big motivator in the way that you lead, and you've said a number of times that to be a follower of Christ requires you to model his leadership. And he modeled a leadership that was really rooted in servanthood. What about for somebody who's maybe they're tuning in and either they don't have a faith or their faith doesn't necessarily factor as a high priority in how they frame their leadership? There's been a lot of leaders throughout history, and not all of them were servant leaders. There's, Genghis Khan, there's Napoleon Bonaparte, there's a host of leaders who weren't servant leaders, yet they, for argument's sake, could be called effective leaders in some part. Why take this route? I mean, there's a few different ways you could lead. Why bother to take this route? Beyond just your personal motivation through faith, which I think is very, very important, but why is it so effective as a leader to serve rather than to, say, dominate or coerce or cajole people?
I don't know if anyone's come up with a better philosophy of life than Rabbi Jesus when he said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah.
Now, many of the world's great faiths have a sentiment that resonates with this, but if you investigate all of them, you write them out, you lay them on the table side by side, you will clearly see that the words that Jesus spoke are unparalleled. They're unparalleled. And if someone can show me a better way than that, I'll follow. I want to follow the highest and the best way, but I can't improve on that fundamental teaching which we've become known, as the golden rule. And this idea of treating others the way that you would want to be treated, somehow it gets beyond more than just effective leadership about quotas and about milestones and key performance indicators. It gets beyond that down to where we live and we are valued as a human being, where there's dignity placed on humanity.
Right.
And it's in that we find greater legacies than just fame or just outcomes. There's something more than to be feared or to be revered. There's something about being loved. It would appear to me that for those with faith and those searching for faith, those searching for purpose, for reason, for meaning, there's something within us that yearns to discover or to touch or to be touched by love and kindness. And that's what, for me, makes the way of Christ unparalleled and so appealing, because he could demand everything, but he doesn't. Yeah. And that's what draws allegiance. That's what gets the most and the best out of followers, by empowering others, by setting others up to succeed, by positioning other people to win. And that again comes down to what makes Jesus completely other to all the others.
It's great. Would you say
That's my observation anyway.
Yeah, and I love your
Yeah.
observation. Would you say that knowing your purpose for leadership really factors into that? It sounds like to me that really all of your leadership is rooted in knowing that your purpose is to model or emulate the example that Jesus has given, and to empower others to be the best versions of themselves. Your purpose could be different. I mean, you mentioned fame, you mentioned to be feared, you mentioned to be revered. That they're all purposes that could motivate people. Would you say that as a leader, it's necessary to understand your purpose as a leader to really get to the core of how you should lead?
Without purpose, without a true north, without a compass point, we're bound to wander. We're bound to go astray. We're bound to get off course. We're bound to misuse something that we don't know its true purpose for.
Yeah.
And that's never truer than human beings when we don't know what our purpose is. And leaders can be, a wonderful thing, but also a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
Misuse position, misuse power, misuse privilege, misuse the opportunities that leadership provides, and a lot more people get hurt, a lot more people suffer. And so we've got to know why we've been blessed by these roles or these positions or these opportunities that have come to us. And when humility has a chance to flourish in our heart, we can actually step back and say, who am I really doing this for? And at the end of the day, when it's all weighed in the balance, when it's all threshed out on the threshing floor, what will be wheat and what will be chaff, what will remain, what will get just burnt up and of no real consequence, either materially here and now by way of financial betterment or family betterment or relational enhancement, or even spiritual and kingdom value that's going to last beyond this life. We've got to ask ourselves, do I know what I'm born for, and am I still heading in that right direction?
Yeah, that's great.
I think purpose is so valuable to us.
So important. And so how do you balance the tension between the need to fulfill your purpose and to serve others and empower them to be the best they can be, with the sometimes necessary role that leaders have to take in being decisive, in being single-minded in the direction that they take? I mean, informally, I've heard you say of yourself that you can at times be an autocratic leader. You know what you want and you know where you're going. How do you balance that component of leadership against this servanthood? Because I think often leaders seem to fall into one of two categories. They're either all about servanthood or they're all about leading strongly from the front. But it sounds to me that there needs to be a tension between the two.
I think there are moments in time when those that we lead need to see a shepherd's heart. And there are other times when a commander needs to emerge.
Right.
And I think it's the moment in time that makes the manifestation of leadership. When we miss the moment and the commander comes out when the shepherd should have come out. Because sometimes a strong voice and a strong hand is called for. Other times it's a compassionate response that's going to yield a greater harvest, yield a more peaceable, yield a more effective outcome. I think when you can't, when you're either one or the other, and you can't have that breadth, that depth of leadership that says, I know what's required at the moment. Yeah, it's like if you only have a hammer in your toolbox, every problem looks like a nail. Sure. You've heard that said before. But I think that it behooves us as leaders to be able to create a capacity within ourselves to realize, and a sensitivity within ourselves to realize this moment calls for a gentler response. I think I sometimes say it like this: we need to know how to lean into a conversation and up the aggression, And we also need to learn how to recline in a conversation and turn the whole volume down and de-escalate the situation. Lamentably, more leaders than not only know which way to go. Yeah. And once blood starts rushing, it's usually all over. You can win the battle, but you've lost the relationship, and that's a loss all round. So I think having the wisdom and having the sensitivity to know which person which aspect of leadership needs to be voiced. When does courage and authority need to be brought out, and when does it need to be put in the pocket, and when do you need to weep with those who are broken? When do you just need to sit? Because it's not hard to criticize, it's not hard to point out, but Jesus didn't do that. He didn't stand on the hill and just point out and say, go that way. He walked with us. And I think for me that's what makes him so appealing. That's what draws me and connects me and bonds me to him and to my faith, because I see that there is a better way. And I've been challenged, I've been inspired, I've been transformed by his model, his example, and his presence.
That's great. So how do you keep that in check? Because I suspect some of it comes down to personality bias. I mean, I know my wife is a very empathetic, very compassionate leader. And she is the sort of person that will get down in the gutter and embrace somebody who is broken. I'm more of a get the job done kind of leader. And I've had to teach myself to slow down, be compassionate, notice the needs of those. And so we probably all have some kind of personality bias in there. How do you keep that in check? I mean, do you know which bias you have, and what have you done to keep the other side of that in check for yourself?
I think that it's tragic when people don't know enough about. They're not self-aware, or their EQ is so diminished, deflated, or just patently undeveloped that they can't read the moment. They can't read the situation. I think these are things that can't be taught in a Bible college classroom setting. These are life skills. These are things that can only be, I guess, born out in the rough and tumble of life. And I've made more than my share of mistakes. I often reflect on something I heard Rick Godwin say a long time ago. He said, when we're young as leaders, we trade leaders for lessons. In other words, he was acknowledging that he'd stuffed up in conflict management or in the moment, and he'd offended somebody, and they'd left and taken their gift and their talent and their resource and their influence and moved out of his sphere of life. And I've ruminated on that idea many times. How many times have I got it wrong? Have I misread the moment? Have I lent into the circumstance when I should have reclined, or vice versa? I definitely know that I'm a centrovert. I reach into both realms, but I still have a will, as we all do, and we can't excuse ourselves from that. We all have an intelligence, we all have a brain, and that's part of loving God with every dimension of our life. That there are times we need to love others with our heart. There's times we need to love with our head. And I think that's important. Again, I come back to the idea of developing as a leader, so that we have got that breadth and that capacity to be able to read the situation and respond in an appropriate and a way that's going to yield the best fruit and the best harvest.
Yeah, it's great. And so how do you come back from those moments where you do read the situation badly, and maybe you say or do things and it breaks relationship with key people or people that you have to restore? How do you come back from that as a leader?
I want to answer that question, but can I just come back to something I didn't answer in your last question?
Please, go.
You asked me, how do I regulate? And one of the things that I think needs to be said is that I've got tremendous blind spots in my life.
Right.
I desperately need other men and women around about me in a team context that can speak into, and I've got to have that rare, commodity of humility, which we all say we have, I hope we have, but is evidenced by our willingness to seek counsel, to seek input, to seek advice, and to run things past other people and get their take on it, and to do analysis after a situation. If I ever have to do this again, what lessons have I learned? And take a moment to journal and to process and to reflect.
Yeah.
I think that's a really major part of keeping yourself in the right place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's so good.
Can we come to the next?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. And look, I just want to, I want to underscore what you've just said, because I've done a number of these conversations over the last couple of months, and there's a common theme that keeps coming out, is having a good team around you to call you on your stuff when you need to, and having humility. And I mean, humility is, I mean, it's a hard thing to develop, especially as a leader sometimes, and especially if you've got people in your world that they look up to you, they admire you, they praise you. You know, it's very easy for pride or self-aggrandization to creep in and you know, manage that humility. And so before we go back to that other question I asked, so what about humility? Because, you know, it's easy to say I'm humble, but you know, if we're all honest with ourselves, we all have moments where we really struggle.
We've got way too much pride.
Yeah,
we've got way too much pride. I think some of the hallmarks of humility is, how many times this last month did you say, "I'm sorry, I was wrong"?
Yeah. Okay.
You know, in the last year, how many times did you go to a team member, a staff member, a work colleague, your spouse, a child, and say, "Please forgive me"?
Yeah.
I overreacted. I underreacted. I was out of line there.
Yeah.
I've got a life verse I'd like to take a moment to share with you, because to me it just it's one of those positioning verses for my life, and it's found in Proverbs.
Great.
I just love the ancient wisdom of Proverbs. You just can't get past it. It says, it's better for a man to control his own spirit than to be able to take a city.
Wow.
And I've reflected so many times and asked myself, David, are you just set on conquest and dominion, or are you set on self-mastery? Are you trying to control and bring into reign your inner world, your inner emotions, your anger, your frustration, your disappointment, your dissatisfaction, your disinterest? Are you keeping control of what's on the inside, or are you just focused on those milestones that others can see on the outside? It's better to control your own spirit, the inner world, than to be able to take a whole city. I find myself being drawn back to that verse mentally many times. This morning I was on the end of a vacuum cleaner, sucking up some dirt from behind a curtain, and the curtain sucked up the vacuum cleaner, and a blast of exasperation came out of my mouth, and I went, Proverbs, better is a man who can control his own spirits. And that's how close to the surface this verse is to me, because even in the little things of life, I want to be able to keep things in check. You know, this is not a small thing, Tarun, because with COVID-19, we're seeing escalations in domestic violence and family tension. And that's not just happening behind closed doors. It's played out in workplaces. It's played out in church staff rooms. This idea of being able to be a life-giving person, one who can control their own spirit, keep their own emotions, rein in their anger, direct it towards the right things, and control the rage on the inside, the passions on the inside. That's where it's all about. And again, that comes back to the teachings of Jesus. You know, he's criticizing people for washing the outside of the cup, but then ignoring the inside of the cup. And that's what it comes down to. And I think, again, we get back to these are the essences, these are the elements and the fundamentals of leadership, Christ-like leadership. We just have to emulate and recenter ourselves relentlessly on the teachings of Jesus. They don't change.
Great.
They're not amended. They're timeless.
That's so good. And I think, like you referenced COVID-19, I think the thing that I found most fascinating is watching different world leaders and how they've managed or navigated their countries through it. And one of the things that's really struck me is there have been some that have conducted themselves with such composure and self-control, and others, without mentioning any names, have really just let everything hang out, and at times said and done things in the heat of exasperation that have probably done more damage to their leadership than anything else.
Certainly.
It's a great reminder for us. So that's probably a good place to go back to the previous question of how do you recover from those moments when when you've overstepped and you've damaged relationship, and you've said humility, being able to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong.
Yeah.
Talk to me
Yeah.
about how that plays out with somebody who, you lead and you have a responsibility for, and how do you maintain, because I've heard leaders say that, you have to make your team respect you, or you have to command authority in the room. And so as a result of that, they're very apprehensive about apologizing or being the first person to apologize. They wait for somebody else to come and apologize to them. How does that play out in what you're describing here of maintaining a sense of, I guess, leadership and poise, but at the same time being humble enough to say, I was wrong?
Yeah. 35 years ago when I was in Bible college, one of my Bible college lecturers who was well respected, he said, maybe once or twice a year you need to show your church that you're a real human being.
Right.
And it was kind of laughed at as if, oh, you would never do that. We don't want to know that you're a real human being.
Yeah.
And I've reflected on that more and more, I guess, in recent years, because there's some things you hear 35 years ago you never remember again. But that one stayed with me, and I've often thought about. I thought if people don't know I'm a real human being with real life struggles, more than twice a year, I think I'm trying to position myself way too far in front of the people. I've got to walk. Shepherds don't walk all the way behind. They don't walk all the way out in front. They walk right with the sheep, and they're out in the front, but they're not kilometers in front. They're right there. And this is the imagery we have throughout Scripture of this servant-hearted. It's a great depiction, and I think it's important. Can I suggest a couple of strategies, Tarun?
Yeah,
more
please.
than
That'd
just
be great.
philosophy.
Yeah.
Why don't we just intentionally practice getting better at this? So it might not be a disaster. Maybe instead of, let's say, 10 is a train wreck in a crisis or a conflict resolution system setting. 10 is a train wreck, and 1 is a complete, wonderful victory.
Yeah.
Maybe you've had some 2s or 3s or 4s or 5s. It's sort of been somewhere in the middle, and you've patched it up. It hasn't been really that good. They haven't left. They haven't kicked the cat or slammed the door on the way out. It's been amicable, and why not go back a day or two, 24, 48 hours later, and sit down and say, would it be okay if we just reviewed my conduct in that room?
Wow.
And actually, could you give me a bit of feedback? Because I really want to get better at this.
Yeah.
I really want to get better. I don't suggest you try it with a 10, a train wreck and a crash, a failure. But you can learn, you can get insights along the way. And if we put the training wheels on and we rode a little for a while, we might find out. And we actually solicited some feedback, and we asked not just the few that are will say yes to anything or our closest, but those that are on the fringe, those that we are seeking to draw in, those that we're seeking to, because I think, again, that's one of the hallmarks of great leadership, is they reach out to people that are on the fringes, and they have this capacity to draw them into the vision, draw them into the purpose, draw them into the mission. And I think asking people for input and asking people to reflect on how could I have been more? What could I have done different? What ways would our conversation have gone better?
Yeah.
We might be surprised at the insights we get from all kinds of people. It's true, isn't it? We go home after a conflict resolution session, we play it through in our mind.
Yeah.
If it's gone well, we go, you did a great job. If it's a disaster, we beat ourselves up. But instead of just letting it be a personal mental process, why not invite others? Not every time, but sometimes, as you seek to improve. We do that when we're young preachers. We ask, hey, can you give me some feedback? What did I do well? What did I do right? We go for a driving test and get a driver's license. And what do? We get analysis, we get feedback, we get instruction. And it's one of those things, I think, that I've never heard anyone else say, but I think it's probably a good idea to sit down and say, we had that issue a week ago, and if we leave it too long, it's kind of goes out of our mind, and all those feelings and all those memories just build to that fuzzy iceberg that's inside of all of our hearts. But if we can go back maybe 2 or 3 days later, the heat of the argument simmered down a little bit. We can say, I always want to improve. Would it be okay with you if I went back and talked about my behavior and my performance? And did you feel valued? Did you feel listened to? Did I understand where you were coming from?
Yeah.
I think that might be helpful to some people.
Absolutely. That's so practical and so helpful. And I would probably go as far as to say that, that's something we can do even when things are not going wrong. In fact, that's a hallmark of what I have observed of you and the way that we have interacted over the number of years that you've been mentoring me, is you're always asking me for feedback. We'll have a conversation and you're mentoring me, and then at the end of the conversation you're saying, how can I serve you better? What is there something else I can do to help you better? You're always looking to improve the outcomes for the other person, and I just
wouldn't that be what Jesus
that. Yeah, well, there
wouldn't
you go.
That be what Jesus
there
wants?
it is right there.
And what's the feeling that's created? What happens when someone does that?
Oh, look, immediately you feel valued. You feel like you've got something to contribute. But more than anything, I think I'm willing to trust you more, because I can see that you're not somebody who thinks you know everything. You're somebody that's still on a journey of growth and development as well, and you're always looking to improve. And so I think that's probably been one of the biggest examples I've taken from my time with you, is the way in which you're always seeking to improve. Even that conference where we first met, one of the questions you were asking us over the whole week was, is there anything we can do better? How can we improve? How's your experience? What can we, and so that constant desire to learn and to grow and to improve one's self-awareness, I think, is just such an impressive quality and something we could apply even when things are not going wrong. So that's my thought on that. But yeah, tell me, David, how do you lead people who I teach a course called Leading Difficult People, and we talk a lot about how there are always people in your world that are going to dig their heels in, maybe not transition as well as you'd hoped. I mean, Sam Chan talks about the 10% devils in your organization. You don't get away from those sorts of people. You have to. I've found that trying to get rid of them or escape from them is really not a productive strategy, because they're just replaced by somebody else. How do you approach those kinds of relationships, keeping in tension this whole idea of serving others and to have good emotional intelligence, but also having these moments where you've got people who are quite clearly that they're not making an easy job of it for you? How do you bring those people around, or how do you deal with those sorts of people positively and effectively?
I have to honestly evaluate the situation, and I've got to recognize that I'm not their leader.
Yeah.
Tell
me more about that. Tell me more about that. I'm not their leader.
Once you've made peace with that, you'll be able to think a little bit differently. Okay. Because while you are trying to lead them, you're just going against the grain. Yeah. So a strategy that can be employed is find out who their leader is.
Okay.
And lead their leader.
Yeah. Interesting.
You'll know who their leader is by the person that they look to when you say something.
Great.
It might be in a staff room setting and you're sitting around a table, you say something, and then this person looks across the table to see what the other person's reaction is.
Yes.
So I'm going to stop trying to lead this person I was trying to lead, and I'm going to lead the leader who's leading them.
Great.
So, of course, I found the hardest person to lead is myself.
Of course. 100%.
But I've got to make peace with the fact that I'm not everybody's leader. In the room, I won't be. All I can do is know the way I'm going. Yeah. This is priceless. It's John Maxwell. You've got to know the way that you're going. You've got to go the way that you're going. You've got to show the way that you're going. Yeah. And you build momentum, you build consistency, you build credibility, and you gain that elusive, rarest commodity you mentioned a little moment ago, that's fundamental to all human relationships, and that's the great commodity of trust.
Yeah, good.
And when trust is gained, well, almost anything is possible.
Yeah.
But when trust is violated, well, then it's all uphill.
Yeah.
It's all uphill. But specifically to answer your question, I realize I'm not everybody's leader.
Yeah.
And so I've got to lead those who are following me and work out how to influence the influencers in such a way that the leadership influence is broadcast and amplified. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the best strategy I can come up with.
Yeah, it's great.
Have enough self-awareness to recognize you're not the biggest fish in town. You're
Yeah.
not everything to everybody.
Yeah.
Stop trying to be that. And it's amazing that those who sometimes were not big supporters will come around.
Yeah, and I've found that too. Yeah, sometimes your most resistant people at the beginning, if you can take the time to build trust with them, become your biggest advocates. I'm just reminded of that adage you mentioned, John Maxwell, where he says, "If you think you're a leader, look behind you. If no one's following you, you're just taking a walk." And that's a hard thing to swallow. Sometimes, I suppose, for many young leaders, they see leadership in the context of position. I've got the title. I'm the leader because I have the job description that says I'm the leader. But really coming to grips with the reality that just because you've got the position or the job description, if nobody's actually following you or recognizing you as the leader, then you've got some work to do.
True that. Another strategy that, just as we go past this idea, is I think it's actually helpful sometimes if I know who's going to be negative towards an idea.
Yeah,
I will leak the idea.
Great.
A little bit ahead of the time, and I'll go to someone. I'll say, I've been thinking about this change that I want to bring, and I just wanted you to be one of the first people that I share the idea with.
Yeah.
And sometimes even just doing something like that can convey a message to people. And here's the thing: if your leadership's about a bag of tricks, it's not going to fly.
No.
But if it's a toolbox of resources and skills and keys, then yes, it is part of the authentic you. And that's what gives credibility to leadership. But if you just pick up somebody else's, armor, it's not going to work. But these are things that I found that work for me. I won't always go to the negative people first. Sometimes my ideas are so fragile. I've got to go to the enthusiasts. I've got to go to the easily excitable, maniacs. I've got to go there first because I've got to get some wind in my sail to get over the hump that I know the change is going to bring. But sometimes I go to the people who are going to struggle with change, and I say, listen, I would like your perspective. And you know what? Some beautiful insights for me have come when I've sat down in those conversations just one-on-one, and I've had them express. Because then when I articulate the vision or I share the dream or the idea with the people, I've got a capacity that's broader to be able to explain to people. I know that someone's going to struggle, and these are the reasons why they're going to struggle. Because now I've got insight that I didn't have before. Now I've got perspective. Now the blind spot has been illuminated to me, and able to say, well, I thought everyone would be excited about this idea because I had it.
Yeah.
But of course, that's not the case. Sometimes my ideas just mean inconvenience for other people. But when I'm able to articulate the reasons why we're going to struggle, but we're going to have to adapt, and I can explain the betterment, and I can explain the path through. Then again, it just puts it puts that deposit in my leadership trust account.
That's great. Now you mentioned not using leadership like a bag of tricks, but a toolbox that you access, and I guess what I take from that is that sometimes as a leader, you can read the leadership books and go to the leadership courses and workshops, and you can learn strategies on how to manage people. But if you're not careful, you can use those strategies in a manipulative fashion because they're going to work. Some of them are psychological frameworks that if you say things a certain way and do things a certain way, you can get buy-in from people. And it can, if you're unscrupulous, manipulate people to your viewpoint. How do you take the knowledge of leadership and the lessons of leadership and utilize them for effective practice without becoming disingenuous or manipulative in what you're doing?
Yeah. I love the question. I love the question. I think that's really, really insightful. Can I be kind
Sure.
and yeah, and straight?
Yeah.
I think sometimes emerging leaders are going to put on or try out things that others have taught them,
Yeah.
and it's loose fitting clothes.
Yeah.
It's another language. It's foreign to them. It's alien to them. It's not authentic yet
Yeah.
to them. And to be kind, to be compassionate to every emerging leader, we see others do things and achieve things, and we try to pick up things that from them, tips, ideas, insights, and they're not authentically ours yet.
Yeah.
But if we use them and utilize them and adapt them into who we are, that become part of this great chemistry that is the gift that God's making us into, that he gives to people and gives to community specifically, then there is authenticity. I become this beautiful mix and blend of all those voices that have spoken into my life and enriched my life. And so again, there is this tension, isn't there, between using things that are just potential, got the power to manipulate and control, versus being blindly ignorant and just not realizing, being completely oblivious to the way I say things is going to put people off, or the location of the conversation is going to be disquieting. It's not going to work to the best. It's not going to produce the best outcome. So there are lots of leadership lessons, but to the heart of it, I think, has got to be, we come back to that idea of purpose and motivation. What is my motivation here? Am I seeking the highest good for the other person? See, Scripture puts it like this. It says that there's no law, Galatians says, there's no law against love. So if love is our motivation, and let's give love a definition. Can we do that?
Yeah, please.
I see love as a strong, positive, emotional bond that relentlessly seeks the good and the highest for the other.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the framework of love. Love, in essence and in short version, love seeks the best for the other person, always, always, always. If my motivation as a leader is love, if it truly is love, then that other desire to manipulate and control and to get my own way becomes a stranger. Becomes foreign to me. It's a language I don't recognize, because I'm following the footsteps of Rabbi Jesus, and I want to go his way, because I'm totally convinced, I'm fully persuaded that his way is ultimately the best way, not just for my own life, but for the way I treat other people.
Yeah, that's good. And that's such a beautiful bookend to our conversation, because that's really where we started, isn't it? If we're leading from a place of wanting the very best for the other person, then we're always going to be leading, even when we make mistakes, we're going to be leading with the right intention and the right motivation. And we're going to have space to recover from the times where we do it badly. I think if we come at it from the place of love and genuine concern for the other person, we can walk that back, and we can say sorry, and we can repair those relationships. But when we come from a place of self-motivated desire or outcome, it's very hard to walk those kinds of situations back, isn't it?
I agree. Yeah. Been great being with you this afternoon.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Is there anything you'd like to share with us just before we close off today? It's just been so good hearing your wisdom today.
It's an absolute pleasure, Tarun. I'm really grateful for the chance to speak with you and catch up. And I hope this is an encouragement, a help, and a blessing to those that log on to your broadcast.
Thank you.
I guess one thing I like to say to people is the person who has a why will always find a how.
That's great.
If you have a reason, if you have vision, and if you have purpose, then every obstacle there can be a solution found for every single obstacle that's in your path. Just get a strong enough why, Just get a big enough why. Just get a glorious enough why, and the how will appear. I'm absolutely convinced of it.
So good.
Bless.
David, if people want to get in touch with you, do you have a preferred way that people can reach out to you?
I don't know. I don't know
Are you on
would want to.
I don't know. I reckon they would. Are you on LinkedIn or anything like that?
No, I'm not. No,
Okay,
that's a really good question. Yeah. They can get in contact with me through you.
There you go. All right. So if you want to get in touch with David, send me a message and I will get you in touch. Thank you so much, David. I really am so grateful for your time and the investment that you've had in my life over the many years, and I look forward to many
Pleasure.
more. Pleasure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Enjoy the journey. Bye for now.
All right. Bye for now. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you got a ton of value out of that. Don't forget to like, comment, and share with somebody who you think will benefit. And make sure you check the description for the free resources that I want to send your way to help you in your growth journey. Until next time, I'm Tarun Stevenson, helping you lead, communicate, and grow to your full potential.